Next, we'll talk about operations on processes. So, these processes in the systems can execute concurrently and they may be created or deleted dynamically. So, these systems must provide a mechanism for process creation and termination. So, the operations on the processes are the process creation, and the second one is process termination. So, first we'll talk about process creation. Okay, a process may create several new processes via a create process system call during the execution of during its execution. Now the creating process is called as the parent, and the new process that would be created, it is called as child. If a process creates multiple new processes, then a parent would create multiple children's. Okay, so each of these new process may in turn create other process, forming a tree of processes. Okay, so process creation is something like this one. So if you have a main process C, say P, okay, it may create a single process. This process may create a single process, like if it is P naught, say if it creates one process, it is called as say suppose P1. In this we call this P naught as parent and P1 as child. Okay, again this P1, it can again create another child, say suppose P2. So again this is a child of this process P1, and this process can be continued. So this is a tree structure. Your process can form a tree structure. Okay, so most operating systems, they identify the processes according to the process identifier, or we call it as PID, which is a unique number that would be given to a particular process. Okay, the process would be identified via unique number that we would call it as PID or process ID. So this is basically a integer number. Okay, so we'll see a diagram for this, then you'll understand. Okay, so this is a tree of process on a Solaris system. Okay, so in Solaris, the process at the top of the tree is this process having the PID 0. As you can see, these are all processes, okay, and each of them have a unique number. Okay, so this first process, it has created three childs. Again, this init process has created two childs. Okay, and the process has been continued, like a parent has multiple children, and this is a form of your tree of process, or process we call, basically call it as process tree. Okay, so this is how it is. Okay, we'll come back to this slide. So whenever you create a process for execution of that, it needs some resources like the CPU time, memory, files, IO devices, etc. So when a process, it creates a sub process or a child, that that particular child may be able to obtain its resources directly from the operating system, or it may be constrained to use the resource of its parent process. The parent may have to partition its resource among its children, or the parent, it has to share its resource with the children. Okay, so when a process, it creates a new process or child process, two possibilities exist in terms of execution. Okay, say suppose this one, we'll take the same example. Whenever this process, parent process P0, whenever it creates or it has created child P1, then execution can happen in two ways. That is, your process, parent process, it can continue to execute concurrently with its child or children's. Okay, or else the parent has to wait till some of his children or all of the children have been terminated. Getting it? So whenever a process, it creates a single child or multiple child or the sub process, the execution can happen in two ways. That is, your process, sorry, parent, it can continue execution along with its children, or else the parent will wait till all of its some or all of its children have executed, or they have been successfully executed. That means they have terminated. Again, there are another two possibilities in terms of your address space of the new process. That means the child process, it can be a duplicate of your parent process. That means it has the same program and the data as same as your parent. Or the child process, it has altogether new program that would be loaded into it. So these are the two possibilities in terms of the address space of the new process. So this is regarding your process creation. Next we'll talk about process termination. Okay. So a process terminates when it finishes executing its final statement and it asks the operating system to delete it by using a exit system call. Okay. While in the process creation we would use fork to create the children's. Okay. In the process termination, whenever a particular process finishes its execution, the last or the final statement, it tells the operating system to delete it by using this exit system call. Okay, now at that point the process, it may return a status value that is typically a integer to its parent process. If suppose the child is terminating at that time. Okay, now all the resources of that particular process, including its memory, files, IO buffers, everything has to be deallocated or it has to be freed up by the operating system. Now, your termination of a process, it can occur in other situations as well. Like a process can cause the termination of another process via a system call. For example, you have a terminate process system call. So usually such a system call can be invoked only by the parent of the process that is to be terminated. Otherwise, users can kill each other processes or each other's jobs. So a parent needs to know, or it has to identify its children. So when a process creates a children or a new process, the identity of that newly created process has to be passed to the parent. At that time, whenever the child, it terminates or it exits, then a status value has to be returned to the parent process. At that time, your parent process will understand that child has successfully terminated. A parent may terminate the execution of one of its child for some of these reasons. Okay, in the first point we had seen the child itself, it terminates. So next we'll see the parent has the authority to terminate the children. What are the reasons behind that? The first one is like the child has exceeded its usage of some of the resources which has been allocated to it. Now, to determine whether this has occurred, the parent must have a mechanism to inspect the state of the child or the children. Okay, whenever the child has exhausted all the resources that has been allocated to it, your parent at this particular moment, it has the right to terminate its child or children. The next reason could be the task assigned to the child is no longer required. Okay, and this is easy to understand. So whatever the process or whatever the task which has been allocated to the child, your parent does not need it. At that time, your parent can terminate the child. The last one is the parent itself is exiting or it is terminating, and the operating does not allow a child to continue if its parent terminates. Right? The parent process is getting terminated, then what is the use of having a child process? At that time, what happens is your operating system, it does not allow the child to continue. That means the child process or the children's of that particular parent process which is terminating, that would be terminated by the operating system. Okay. In some systems, they do not allow the children or the child of a particular parent to exist in the system if the parent has been terminated. That means if a parent has been terminated, your system do not allow the children to be active or to be, continue their execution in the system. So in such systems, what will happen is if a process or your parent process, it terminates normally or abnormally, then all of its children must have to be terminated. Now this phenomena we call it as cascading termination, and it would be normally initiated by the operating system. I'll repeat once again. So in some systems what will happen is whenever the parent process is terminated or terminating, maybe normally or abnormally, in that case all the children of that particular parent process, they have to terminate from the system. Whenever the parent terminates, the corresponding children or its children has to be terminated. Now this process we call it as cascading termination. Okay, fine. So this is all about your process termination. So there are two operations on the process. One is creation and the next one is termination. Next, we'll talk about inter-process communication, IPC. Okay, how the process will talk to each other. So the processes executing concurrently in an operating system, they may be either independent processes or they can be cooperating processes. Okay, so we say that the process is independent. So that means it will not affect any of the process in the system, or it cannot be affected by any of the process that is executing in the system. It is independent. It does its own task, it terminates. Right? The second one we have is cooperating processes. So we say a process is cooperating if it can affect any other process in the system that is executing, or the process can be affected by any other processes executing in the system. So there are two types of processes, independent and cooperating. Okay, so any process that shares the data with another process, we call it them as cooperating processes. So there are two fundamental models for communication. One is shared memory and message passing. So before that we'll study the reasons for providing an environment that allows the process cooperation. Why this process cooperation is needed? So the first one is information sharing, next computational speed up, third one is modularity, and the fourth one is convenience. Okay, so for these reasons your environment, it allows cooperation processes. So information hiding, the first one. So this means since several users may be interested in the same piece of information, say example of shared file, so we must provide an environment to allow concurrent access to the same information. At that time we need cooperative or cooperating process. Next one is computational speed up. So if we want a particular task to run faster, we must break it into subtasks. So each of these will be executing in parallel with others, right? So if we do like this, then the computational speed would be increased. The third one is modularity. So in this case, we may want to construct a system in a modular fashion, that is dividing the system functions into separate processes or threads. Right? The last one is convenience. So even an individual user may not work on many tasks at the same time. So for example, user may be editing, printing and compiling in parallel. So for these reasons, we need cooperating processes. So there are two types of inter-process communication. That means how two processes would communicate with each other. One is by shared memory, the next one is by message passing. So first we'll talk about shared memory. So in the shared memory system, what will happen is the region of the memory is shared by the cooperating process. Okay, the process can then start exchanging of the information. That is, they can read the data which is present in the shared memory, something like this from here, and they can write the data into this shared region. Okay, so say suppose process A has kept some data, it has updated and kept in the shared region. Now the process B can read the data from this particular shared region. Okay, so the shared memory region, it is present or it resides in the address space of the process, creating the shared memory segment. So the other process that wish to communicate using this shared memory segment, they must attach their address space. So normally in the operating system that tries to prevent one users from accessing other person's memory, right? So shared memory requires that the two or more processes agree to remove this restriction. That means the two of the process can talk to each other. So they can exchange information by reading and writing the data in the shared areas. The form of the data and the location, these are determined by these processes and are not under the control of the operating system. The processors are also responsible for ensuring that they are not writing into the same location simultaneously. Okay, so this is this whenever we have shared memory system concept, the operating system is not in charge of this one. It is the responsibility of the processes. That means the two processes, cooperating processes, cannot write the data in the shared region at the same time. So this is about shared memory systems. Next we will study message passing systems. So in the message passing system, the communication takes place by means of the messages that would be exchanged between the cooperating processes. Okay. So the message passing, it provides a mechanism that will allow the processes to communicate and to synchronize their actions without sharing the same address space. Okay, and it is particularly useful in a distributed environment where the communicating process, it resides on different computers connected via network. So the message passing system, they provide two operations. One is send message, okay, and the other one is receive message. So the messages sent by a process can be of either fixed or variable length or size. So if the fixed size messages are sent, then the system level implementation is straightforward. But if it is like variable sized messages that are shared, that requires a complex system level implementation. But the programming task becomes easier whenever the variable length messages would be transferred. Okay, so as you can see in the diagram, this is for message passing systems. So if suppose process A wants to communicate with process B, then the process A has to send the message to the kernel, then the message would be sent to the process B via kernel. Okay, so this is about message passing systems. That's it for today. We'll conclude our session. Thank you.